dramatically for the relationships between cities in the United States and the cities in the former Soviet Union, including Russia. The topic's very interesting today because yesterday I was at a forum in Washington, which was sponsored by the Eurasia Center and called the U.S.-Russia Forum. And the reason for the forum, which is an annual thing, but the focus on the forum yesterday was whether or not now, given the relations between the United States and Russia, we are on the brink of a second Cold War. Not with the Soviet Union this time, but specifically in the thawing, the isolation of relations between the United States and Russia, most of which has to do with Ukraine, but it has to do with a lot of other issues that have become more critical between the United States and Russia. And so there was a lot of reference at this forum yesterday, which included, for example, people like Ambassador Jack Matlock, who was ambassador in the Soviet Union. Possibility of the Cold War.
Could you speak to any of the effects that you noticed the Cold War was having in America, daily life?
During the Cold War period, I think the effects were a general misunderstanding between the Soviet Union and the United States. A fear of basically most American people feared the power of the Soviet Union. There was the nuclear threat, and one of the results of the ending of the Cold War was the agreements to disarm and to disarm nuclear weapons. And in fact, Ukraine has one of the current controversies, because Ukraine actually did dismantle and get rid of all their nuclear facilities and nuclear weapons. And there was an agreement that would be recognized as part of the stability for the new sovereign country of Ukraine. And now that Russia has annexed Crimea, which is part of Ukraine, there are arguments that this violates that nuclear agreement. And what other chance is there for nuclear agreements from Iran and other countries, particularly Iran, if they won't be abided by? So that's a current result of controversy of what they classify as the Cold War. But I think during the Cold War, in the Cold War period, there was just a lot of mistrust. As I said, President Reagan called Russia the evil empire. And it wasn't until President Gorbachev came along and into power in Russia, in the Soviet Union, that there was the opportunity to go beyond those threats. In the midst of all that, we did have a number of U.S. cities that wanted to, for example, and people in those cities, when you asked about people, high interest at the local level throughout the United States in doing something, getting involved, having an opportunity for two-way dialogue rather than just fear. And in fact, prior to the 1991 conference I mentioned in Cincinnati, the first U.S.-Soviet conference, sister city conference, was in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, in 1989. And at that time, there were still only 10 U.S.-Soviet sister cities. but there were 90 other cities on that airplane that went to Tashkent, Moscow and Tashkent, that wanted to do something, wanted to crack the barrier of the Cold War, wanted to get rid of the animosity and the fear and the doubt that the Cold War raised.
Could you talk a little bit more about your role in the sister cities?
Well, Sister Cities is a national organization in the United States, a nonprofit organization. I was the CEO, the chief operating officer, so the head of the association. So my role was to manage the staff and to help expand the program, not only with Russia or the Soviet Union, but with countries throughout the world. When I started as CEO, there were a couple hundred total relationships with U.S. cities and cities around. When I left, we had about 2,000 relationships between U.S. cities and cities all over the world. And a lot of expanding relationships, not only with the former Soviet Union, but after the Cold War, but with China, particularly with China and Latin America, very strong, and now a very strong emphasis on relations between U.S. cities and cities in Africa, all over the African continent.
You mentioned the conference in Cincinnati when people came over from the Soviet Union and then it broke up. Can you talk about a little your thoughts when you heard the Soviet Union broke up and then the people on that conference?
Yeah, everybody was shocked. And in fact, Jack mentioned Jack Matlock was the ambassador in Moscow during the breakup of the Soviet Union. When he came to Cincinnati, he came as the former ambassador. He was just leaving his post. And my understanding is that it was questionable whether the plane would take off from Moscow because of the fact that the Soviet Union was breaking up. And they had all the mayors gathered from the different cities around the Soviet Union, but they weren't quite sure whether they now all could travel or even come to the United States under the circumstances. But there was a lot of political pressure and a lot of pressure from local governments around the former Soviet Union to go ahead with it. So the plane did take off from Moscow, and we had arranged for it to land. It was an Aeroflot. I don't know if you know, but Aeroflot was the largest airlines in the world during the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union broke up, Aeroflot also broke up into about 180 different airlines. We arranged through the Air Force, the American Air Force, to allow Aeroflot to fly directly into Cincinnati, which was the first.